Murphy's Diner hummed with the comfortable rhythm of a typical Tuesday morning in Millbrook. The small town, nestled in the heart of rural America with a population just under 4,000, carried that timeless quality where everyone supposedly knew everyone else. Steam rose from industrial coffee pots behind the counter, mingling with the rich aroma of bacon sizzling on the griddle and hash browns crisping to golden perfection. Local farmers occupied their usual corner booths, voices low as they discussed crop yields and the unpredictable spring weather that could make or break their season. Samuel Washington pushed through the glass door at exactly 7:30 in the morning, just as he had every Tuesday for the past 3 years. His routine never varied, not by a single minute. Black coffee, wheat toast, exact change counted carefully from a worn leather wallet that had seen better days. The elderly man moved with a quiet dignity that spoke of discipline earned over decades. His navy cardigan showing its age but pressed neat and clean, not a wrinkle visible. To the casual observer, he was just another retired gentleman enjoying his weekly breakfast ritual. Maria Santos glanced up from behind the counter, her warm smile immediate and genuine. The young waitress had memorized his order within the first month, though she always waited for him to speak first out of respect. "Morning, Mr. Washington," she called out cheerfully. "The usual." "Please, Maria." "Thank you kindly," Samuel replied, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who chose his words with care. He settled into his preferred booth near the back wall, the one that offered a clear view of both the entrance and the rear exit. Old habits never died, especially ones forged in combat zones half a world away. Maria poured his coffee without asking how he took it. Black, no sugar, no cream. A simple man with simple needs, or so it appeared to anyone watching. What most customers missed were the telling details that spoke of a different story beneath the surface. The way Samuel sat with his back firmly against the wall, his eyes periodically scanning the exits with practiced efficiency. The precise way he folded his napkin, military corners sharp enough to cut. The American flag pin on his collar that never seemed to tarnish despite its obvious age, positioned next to an American Legion pin, both aligned with exacting precision. His phone buzzed softly against the table. A text message illuminated the screen. "Dad, big meeting with the cabinet today. Love you." The sender's name read simply, James. Samuel's weathered face softened into a smile that reached his eyes. He typed back slowly, using one finger the way people of his generation often did, each letter deliberate. "Proud of you, son. Be safe." Across the diner, Bradley Morrison occupied his usual corner booth, scrolling through social media on his phone with the absent focus of someone killing time. His construction crew uniform was still pristine this early in the morning, the logo of Morrison Building Solutions embroidered across the chest, but his attitude was already stained with something darker. He'd been a regular at Murphy's for 2 years now, ever since the new housing development on the east side had brought what he called different types to their quiet town. Bradley's eyes tracked Samuel's movements with obvious disdain that he made no effort to conceal. The old man's careful counting of quarters on the table, his polite nods to other customers who passed by his booth, the way he quietly minded his own business, bothering absolutely no one. Everything about Samuel Washington seemed to irritate Bradley Morrison on a fundamental level, like an itch he couldn't quite reach. "Don't know why they let just anyone wander in here these days," Bradley muttered to his breakfast companion, loud enough that surrounding tables couldn't help but overhear. His voice carried that particular tone of someone testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before someone pushed back. "Used to be a nicer place, if you know what I mean." The businessman at the next table shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly very interested in his newspaper. Patricia Patterson, the mayor's wife, glanced up from her coffee with a slight frown creasing her forehead, but she said nothing. Nobody ever did. That was part of the problem that had been festering in Millbrook for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Maria's jaw tightened as she refilled coffee cups along the counter, her knuckles wide around the pot's handle. She'd watched this pattern develop over the past several months, each incident slightly bolder than the last. Bradley's comments growing sharper, his jokes becoming less funny and more pointed, his entire demeanor shifting from casual prejudice to something that felt dangerously close to active hostility. She'd thought about saying something to Frank, the manager, but Bradley was a regular customer who tipped well when the mood struck him. In small-town diners where profit margins were razor-thin, money often talked louder than dignity. Outside the wide front window, college student Thomas Carter was setting up his camera equipment on the sidewalk, adjusting his tripod to get the perfect angle. His assignment was straightforward enough: document real small-town America for his journalism class at the State University. He'd chosen Murphy's Diner because it looked authentic and timeless, the kind of place where honest people shared honest conversations over strong coffee and home cooking. The kind of establishment that represented something genuine in an increasingly artificial world. Thomas adjusted his lens carefully and checked his audio levels, making sure everything was calibrated correctly. His professor had emphasized the importance of capturing genuine moments, unguarded interactions that revealed true character rather than performed behavior. He had absolutely no idea he was about to document something that would reach the highest levels of American government before the day was through. The security camera mounted above Samuel's booth blinked its steady red recording light, a silent witness that nobody paid any attention to. The diner's owner had installed the system 6 months earlier after a rash of petty thefts from the register during late-night shifts. What he hadn't anticipated was how valuable that footage might become for entirely different reasons. Samuel's phone buzzed again, against the worn Formica table. This time, it was a news alert about federal funding for rural law enforcement programs, one of those automated notifications that he'd learned to navigate in recent years. He read it carefully, his eyes moving slowly across the screen, then deleted it without comment. Some habits from his son's world had rubbed off on him over time. Even if he didn't fully understand all the technology involved, Bradley Morrison was getting restless now, his breakfast companion having left for an early shift at the lumberyard. He found himself with time to kill before his own construction crew was due to meet at the site. And the elderly man in the corner booth represented everything he thought was wrong with his changing town. The resentment had been building for weeks, fueled by online echo chambers and like-minded friends who reinforced his worst instincts. The morning crowd began to thin naturally as the clock approached 8. Farmers headed to their fields to begin the day's work. Office workers drove to their jobs in the county seat 20 miles away. The traveling salesman settled his check with exact change and left with a friendly wave. Soon it would be just the regulars and the lingerers. And one elderly man who had no idea his peaceful Tuesday morning routine was about to transform into something far darker. Maria glanced at her phone when it vibrated in her apron pocket. A text from her cousin Thomas outside, getting great footage of authentic small town life. This place is perfect. She looked out the window and waved, a genuine smile crossing her face. Thomas waved back enthusiastically, still filming through his viewfinder. Neither of them had the slightest clue they were about to become key witnesses to an assault that would go viral within hours and spark a federal investigation. Before sunset dotted exactly 47 minutes past 7 in the morning, Thomas Carter positioned his camera for what he thought would be the perfect shot of small-town American life. He had no earthly idea he was about to capture evidence that would land on the director of Homeland Security's desk before lunchtime. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. And Bradley Morrison's patience had just run out completely. Part 2. Lines. Bradley Morrison's chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor as he stood, the harsh sound cutting through the gentle morning conversation like a warning shot. His work boots hit the ground with deliberate heaviness as he crossed the diner, each step calculated to draw attention. Every eye in Murphy's followed his movement, conversations dying mid-sentence as people instinctively sensed something ugly about to unfold. Samuel looked up as a shadow fell across his table, blocking the morning sunlight that had been warming his coffee. Bradley loomed over him with arms crossed, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist that probably cost more than Samuel spent on groceries in 3 months. The contrast was stark and intentional. "Morning," Samuel said politely, his military training automatically defaulting to courtesy, even in the face of obvious hostility. "You seem real comfortable here," Bradley announced, his voice loud enough to ensure everyone in the diner heard every word. Real comfortable for someone who doesn't belong. The temperature in Murphy's diner dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Forks stopped moving halfway to mouths. Coffee cups paused in midair. Maria's hand moved instinctively toward her phone in her apron pocket, though she didn't pull it out yet. "Not yet, I'm sorry," Samuel responded, genuine confusion crossing his weathered features. He'd faced this kind of confrontation before over the decades, more times than he cared to count. But it never got easier. "This ain't your kind of place, old man," Bradley continued, his chest puffing out with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "Makes decent people uncomfortable having your type around here." Patricia Patterson shifted nervously in her booth, her coffee forgotten. Fire Chief Rodriguez, who'd been quietly finishing his breakfast before his shift started, tensed visibly but didn't move. The entire diner seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see if anyone would actually stand up and say something. Samuel, Washington had faced enemy fire in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. He'd stared down danger that would have broken lesser men. But this moment, in a small-town diner in the country he'd served with distinction, felt different. More personal. More painful. "I'm just having coffee," Samuel said quietly, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I'm not bothering anyone here." "That's where you're wrong." Bradley leaned closer, invading Samuel's personal space with practiced intimidation. "Your being here bothers me. Bothers a lot of good people who remember when Millbrook was different." Outside, Thomas Carter's camera captured every word through the large front window, the external microphone he'd set up picking up the audio with crystal clarity. He'd started filming what he thought would be local color for his assignment. Now he was documenting something much darker, something that made his stomach turn, even as his journalistic instincts told him to keep recording. The security camera mounted on the wall recorded everything with perfect clarity. Audio, video, timestamps that would become crucial evidence in ways nobody could have predicted. Every moment, every word, every gesture preserved in digital memory. Samuel reached for his worn leather wallet, intending to leave before the situation escalated further. Sometimes discretion was the better part of valor, especially at his age. But Bradley's hand slammed down on the table with enough force to make the coffee cup jump, hot liquid sloshing over the rim and pooling across the formica surface. "Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you," Bradley growled, his face flushing red with anger that had been building for months. "You hear me, old man?" Coffee spread across the table in a dark puddle. Quarters that Samuel had carefully counted out for his bill scattered, some rolling off the edge to ping against the floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the silent diner. "Sir, please," Samuel said, his military discipline holding firm even as his pulse quickened. "I don't want any trouble here." "Trouble?" Bradley laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Old man, you are the trouble. Coming in here, acting like you own the place. Like you belong with decent folks. Maria pulled out her phone then, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the camera app. She'd been silent too long, complicit through inaction. No more. She hit record and held the phone steady, capturing everything. Fire Chief Rodriguez half stood from his booth, unsure how to intervene without making things worse. Patricia Patterson looked around frantically, as if hoping someone else would take charge of the situation. Samuel stood slowly, his military bearing evident despite his 72 years. Something in his posture, the way he held himself with quiet dignity, made Bradley take an involuntary step backward. For just a moment, the bully saw something in those eyes that spoke of strength earned through decades of service and sacrifice. "I'm leaving now," Samuel said with that same quiet dignity that had carried him through countless difficult situations. There's no need for this to continue. But Bradley Morrison wasn't done. He'd started something in front of an audience, and his pride wouldn't let him back down now. Not when people were watching. Not when his authority had been challenged by someone he decided didn't deserve respect. Bradley stepped sideways, deliberately blocking Samuel's path to the door. His body language was clear. "You'll leave when I decide you can leave." The physical intimidation was obvious to everyone watching, witnessed by dozens of people and recorded by multiple cameras that would later prove crucial. "You'll leave when I say you can leave," Bradley stated flatly, his voice carrying a threat that needed no elaboration. At exactly 52 minutes past 7 in the morning. Thomas Carter zoomed in his camera lens, his journalism training recognizing that something significant was unfolding. He had no idea he was documenting an assault that would trigger a federal civil rights investigation and change Millbrook forever. Samuel Washington stood trapped between his booth and Bradley Morrison's bulk, his path to the door blocked by someone who decided that morning that he had the right to decide who belonged in public spaces. The construction worker's chest puffed out further, feeding off the attention from the silent diner, drunk on the power of public humiliation. "Please move," Samuel requested, his voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. "Make me." "Old man." Bradley's lips curled into a sneer that revealed the ugliness he usually kept hidden beneath a veneer of working-class respectability. "What are you going to do? Call for help?" The racist taunt hung in the air like smoke. Samuel's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but his military training held firm. Never escalate. Never give them an excuse. Never stoop to their level, no matter how much they deserve it. But Bradley Morrison wasn't looking for excuses anymore. He was looking for an audience, and he'd found one. "You people think you can just waltz in anywhere these days," Bradley continued, his voice rising with each word. "Think you own everything now. Well, this is my town, and I decide who belongs here." Samuel attempted to step to the left, trying to move around the obstruction without physical contact. Bradley shifted to block him again, a grotesque dance of intimidation that made several customers look away in shame. "I said you're not leaving yet," Bradley repeated, his voice dropping to something darker and more threatening. That's when he shoved Samuel hard. The elderly veteran stumbled backward, his hip catching the edge of the booth's table with a sickening thud. Coffee cups that Maria had just refilled crashed to the floor, the sound of breaking ceramic filling the diner like gunshots echoing across a battlefield. Brown liquid spread across the linoleum in an expanding pool. "Hey!" Fire Chief Rodriguez stood up fully now, his voice carrying authority. "That's enough, Bradley." But Bradley Morrison was just getting started. The shove had felt good. The power, the control, the way the old man's eyes had widened in shock and pain. He wanted more of that feeling. Needed it. "Mind your own business, Rodriguez," Bradley snarled without taking his eyes off Samuel. "Unless you want some of this too." Maria Santos raised her phone higher, making absolutely sure she captured everything. Her hand shook with fear and anger, but the video remained steady. "Stop it, Bradley!" she shouted across the diner. "He hasn't done anything wrong." "Shut up, Maria," Bradley snapped at her. "You want to keep your job. You'll stay out of this and mind your business." The threat silenced her words, but not her camera. She kept recording, documenting everything for a reason she couldn't quite articulate yet. Somewhere deep down, she knew this evidence would matter. Samuel tried to steady himself against the booth's table, his hand gripping the edge for support. At 72 years old, a hard shove like that could mean broken bones, serious injury, months of recovery. But what hurt more than his hip was the humiliation burning through him. The way every single person in Murphy's diner was watching him be degraded, reduced to something less than human by a man who decided Samuel's existence was offensive. "Now you're going to apologize," Bradley demanded, standing over him like a conqueror, "for making decent folks uncomfortable with your presence." Samuel looked up at him, and for just a moment, something flickered in those eyes. Something that had seen combat, that had faced down real danger, that knew the difference between strength and bullying. "I apologize if my presence upset you," Samuel said quietly, choosing his words with careful precision. "But I have done nothing wrong here." "Wrong answer." Bradley's face turned a deeper shade of red, rage building to a crescendo that everyone watching knew was coming, but nobody seemed able to stop. The slap came without warning. Bradley's open hand cracked across Samuel's face with brutal force, the sound echoing through Murphy's diner like a thunderclap. Samuel's head snapped to the side, his American flag pin catching the overhead lights as he staggered. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth where his teeth had cut. The inside of his cheek. Complete silence fell over the diner for exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Part 3. The phone call. Jesus Christ. Fire Chief Rodriguez moved toward them, his breakfast abandoned. "Oh my God!" Patricia Patterson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "You absolute bastard!" Maria screamed, her professional composure finally breaking completely. Outside, Thomas Carter's camera automatically zoomed in on the assault, the journalism student's hands moving on instinct while his mind struggled to process what he'd just witnessed. Inside, Maria's phone captured the perfect angle of Bradley's hand making contact, the violence crystal clear and undeniable. The security camera recorded it all in high definition. Multiple angles that would leave no room for doubt or reinterpretation. Samuel's hand went slowly to his burning cheek, fingers coming away with a smear of blood from where Bradley's ring had cut the skin. For a long moment, the elderly veteran looked exactly like what he appeared to be. A helpless old man being brutalized by a racist thug in front of a room full of witnesses, who'd done nothing to stop it until it was too late. But then something shifted in Samuel's posture. His shoulders straightened despite the pain. His chin lifted with quiet defiance. 72 years of dignity and military training kicked in, overriding the shock and humiliation. He'd been hit harder by better men in worse places, and he'd never stayed down before. "You just made a very serious mistake," Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent diner with unexpected strength. Bradley laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Yeah? What are you going to do about it, Grandpa? Call the cops? They drink coffee here too, and they know who matters in this town." Samuel reached into his cardigan pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. Not for a weapon, as some might have feared, but for his phone. The worn device that had seemed so out of place in his weathered hands suddenly took on new significance. "I'm going to call my son," Samuel stated calmly, scrolling through his contacts with one finger. "Your son?" Bradley's laughter got louder, more confident, feeding off the audience that had gathered. "What's he going to do? Come fight your battles for you like some kind of hero?" Samuel's finger stopped on the first name in his contact list. The display showed simply, James, Director, Homeland Security. But Bradley Morrison was too high on adrenaline and racist rage to notice the phone screen. Too drunk on power to read the warning signs. Too convinced of his own invulnerability to understand that he just crossed a line that would destroy his entire life. Hit me back, old man, Bradley demanded, his chest heaving with exertion and excitement. Come on, show everyone what you're really made of. Let's see it. Fire Chief Rodriguez stepped closer, his hand outstretched in a calming gesture. Bradley, you need to stop this right now. This has gone way too far already. For what? Bradley spun around, his eyes wild. You going to arrest me, Rodriguez? For what? Teaching some respect to someone who needs to learn his place? That's when Samuel pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and then a voice answered immediately. Young male, concerned, and carrying an undertone of authority that made several people in the diner straighten unconsciously. Dad, is everything okay? The voice came through the speaker, loud enough for those nearby to hear, immediate concern evident in every syllable. The diner went dead quiet. Something in that voice, that instant response, that natural authority made everyone stop and listen. This wasn't someone's cousin or nephew calling back. This was someone important, someone who commanded respect automatically. James, Samuel said calmly, his voice steady despite the blood still trickling from his cut cheek. I'm fine, but there's been an incident here. Dad, are you hurt? The voice sharpened with worry. Where are you exactly? I can have agents there in 20 minutes. Maybe 15 if I push it. The words, agents, and 15 minutes, landed like bombs in the middle of Murphy's diner. Every phone camera that had been recording suddenly focused more intently. The security system's red light seemed to blink faster. Outside, Thomas Carter's hands started shaking so badly he nearly dropped his expensive camera equipment. Bradley Morrison's face went from flushed red to sheet white in approximately 5 seconds. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air on a dock. The expensive watch on his wrist suddenly felt heavy, like chains rather than jewelry. Agents? He whispered, the word barely audible. No, son, Samuel said into the phone with remarkable calm, given that his cheek was still burning and blood was staining his collar. I'm not seriously injured, but I wanted you to hear about this directly from me before it hits the news. Before it hits the news? James's voice carried a mix of concern and something else. The steel of someone used to handling crises at the highest levels. Dad, what exactly happened? Who hurt you? Samuel looked directly at Bradley Morrison, whose swagger had evaporated completely in the space of a single phone conversation. The construction worker stood frozen, his brain finally catching up to the reality of his situation. A man named Bradley Morrison just assaulted me at Murphy's Diner in Millbrook. Samuel stated clearly, each word chosen with precision. It's all been recorded by multiple cameras. I believe there are at least 3 separate video recordings of the entire incident. The silence in Murphy's Diner became absolutely deafening. Several customers' jaws literally dropped open in shock. Sir? Maria approached Samuel carefully, her phone still recording but her voice shaking. Is that really your son on the phone? Samuel nodded once, a simple confirmation that changed everything. James Washington. He serves as the Director of Homeland Security. Fire Chief Rodriguez slapped his own forehead hard enough to leave a mark. Jesus Christ, Bradley, he breathed. Do you have any idea what you just did? Patricia Patterson gasped so loudly it echoed off the diner's walls. Her face had gone as white as Bradley's. The James Washington? She whispered in horror. The director who testified before Congress last month? Dad, I'm sending a protective detail immediately. James's voice continued through the speakerphone. All business now. And our legal team is going to want statements from all witnesses. This is a federal civil rights matter now." The word federal hit Bradley like a bucket of ice water dumped over his head. His knees actually wobbled slightly. His gold rings suddenly felt like they were burning his fingers. The expensive watch that had seemed like such a status symbol now mocked him with every tick. "Oh God," Bradley whispered, the words barely audible. "Oh God, oh no." Maria's phone was still recording, capturing every second of Bradley's complete breakdown. Her Instagram livestream, which she'd started without really thinking about it, showed the viewer count jumping from 50 to 200 to 800 to 3,000 in real time. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them. "Oh my God, is that really the Homeland Security guy's dad? Bradley Morrison about to get destroyed. Screenshot everything, this is going federal. Someone's going to prison for a hate crime." Outside the window, Thomas Carter nearly dropped his camera as the full implications hit him. He'd been filming what he thought was a simple case of small-town racism for a college journalism project. Instead, he just captured on film an unprovoked assault on the father of one of the most powerful men in the entire United States government. His hand shook as he checked his woes. Recording. Every single second was there, crystal clear. The racist taunts, the physical intimidation, the shove, the slap, all of it documented in high definition with perfect audio. "Dad, are the local authorities there yet?" James's voice cut through the chaos, professional and focused, despite the personal nature of the situation. "Not yet," Samuel replied, still remarkably composed. "But Fire Chief Rodriguez is here as a witness. He saw everything that happened." Rodriguez stepped forward, his face pale but his voice steady. "Mr. Washington, I saw everything," he confirmed loudly enough for the phone to pick up his words. "Bradley Morrison assaulted you completely unprovoked. There was no justification whatsoever for his actions." Bradley finally found his voice again, panic making it crack and break. Wait, please. This is all just a misunderstanding, right? I mean, no real harm done, right, Samuel? I mean, Mr. Washington, sir?" The desperate attempt to suddenly show respect he'd refused moments earlier would have been pathetic if it wasn't so transparent. Samuel looked at the man who had called him garbage 5 minutes ago. The man who'd shoved him hard enough to potentially cause injury. The man who'd slapped him across the face with enough force to draw blood. "The harm was done when you decided who I was based solely on how I look," Samuel said quietly but firmly. "The harm was done when you felt entitled to put your hands on me because you thought I was powerless. But I didn't know." Bradley's voice rose desperately. "I didn't know who your son was. I never would have, and that makes it acceptable?" Samuel interrupted, his voice carrying decades of earned authority. "The fact that you didn't know I had powerful connections somehow justifies assaulting me?" Bradley's face crumpled as the reality sank in completely. He'd just committed a federal hate crime on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses, against the father of the director of Homeland Security. His life as he knew it was over, and he could see that truth reflected in every face staring at him with a mixture of shock, disgust, and horror. Thomas Carter's hand shook as he checked his equipment one more time. The raw footage would need to be uploaded immediately. His fingers moved across his laptop keyboard, creating a new YouTube video. The title came to him instantly. Shocking. Racist Attack on Director of Homeland Security's Father, Live. The video would hit 50,000 views within the first hour. By evening, it would be international news. James's voice came through Samuel's phone again, and this time everyone in the diner could hear the steel beneath the concern. "Dad, I need you to understand something important. Federal investigators are going to be involved in this case. Not because of my position, but because what happened to you today was a clear civil rights violation under federal law." Bradley Morrison sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his construction crew uniform soaked through with cold sweat. His face had gone from white to gray. The reality of federal investigation, potential prison time, and complete life destruction was setting in with crushing weight. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears actually starting to form in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "I wouldn't have ... You wouldn't have what?" Samuel asked, his voice quiet but relentless. "Assaulted me if you'd known I had powerful connections? But you were perfectly fine doing it when you thought I was powerless and alone." The truth of those words hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. This wasn't about mistaken identity or a misunderstanding. This was about character, about who you really are when you think nobody important is watching. About the person you become when you believe there will be no consequences for your actions. Maria kept recording, her phone steady now despite the tears running down her own face. Patricia Patterson was openly weeping in her booth. Fire Chief Rodriguez stood with his arms crossed, bearing witness to a moment that would define Millbrook for years to come. Within 30 minutes, this local incident would be on the radar of federal investigators from 3 different agencies. Within an hour, it would be breaking news on national networks. Within 3 hours, Bradley Morrison's name would be trending on social media alongside hashtags about justice and accountability. But Bradley Morrison's real troubles were just beginning. What he didn't know yet was that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was the moment when a much larger pattern of systematic racism in Millbrook was about to be exposed to the harsh light of federal scrutiny. The phone call that changed everything had been made. The evidence had been recorded from multiple angles. The wheels of justice, slow but inexorable, had begun to turn. And for once, dignity had a voice that couldn't be silenced. Within 20 minutes of Samuel's phone call, Sheriff Patricia Hayes arrived at Murphy's diner with her body camera recording everything from the moment she stepped through the door. She'd known Samuel Washington for years as a quiet, reliable, regular customer who never caused trouble. She'd also known Bradley Morrison as someone who walked the line between aggressive and problematic. Someone with connections to local contractors and politicians who made her job complicated. The political calculations began the instant she assessed the scene. "Morning, Samuel, Bradley." Sheriff Hayes surveyed the diner with practiced efficiency, noting the broken coffee cups scattered across the floor, the witnesses with their phones still out and recording, the palpable tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "Heard there was an incident here. Want to tell me what happened?" Maria stepped forward immediately, her phone still recording every second. "Sheriff, Bradley Morrison assaulted Mr. Washington. I recorded the whole thing on video. Everyone here saw it happen." Hayes took Maria's phone and reviewed the footage, her expression growing increasingly uncomfortable as she watched Bradley's racist language, the deliberate physical intimidation, the violent shove, and finally the brutal slap that had drawn blood. The evidence was damning and crystal clear. No room for interpretation or spin. "Bradley, I'm going to need a detailed statement from you," Hayes said carefully, her voice neutral in that way law enforcement officers use when they're buying time to think. "Samuel, do you want to press charges?" Samuel considered the question carefully, his hand still pressed against his bleeding cheek. The cut wasn't deep, but it stung with every heartbeat. "I want this incident documented properly and completely," he stated clearly. "Whatever happens next should follow the law exactly as it's written." Meanwhile, outside the diner, the first news van pulled into the parking lot, its satellite dish extending toward the sky like a metal flower blooming. Then another van arrived, and another. Tommy Carter's video had already hit 100,000 views and was climbing exponentially. The hashtag Millbrook Diner was trending regionally, spreading across social media platforms like wildfire through Drybrush. Inside Millbrook City Hall, Mayor Thompson's phone rang with an incoming call from Sheriff Hayes. His voice carried the barely concealed panic of a politician sensing disaster approaching at high speed. "Patricia, please tell me we can handle this quietly," Mayor Thompson said without preamble. "Tourism season starts next month. Bad publicity could devastate local businesses. The economic impact could be severe." Hayes lowered her voice, turning away from the crowd in the diner. "Tom, this is the director of Homeland Security's father we're talking about. There's no handling this quietly. The toothpaste is out of the tube." "Jesus Christ," Mayor Thompson breathed into the phone. "How bad is it really?" "Bad enough that I'm expecting federal investigators to arrive by lunchtime," Hayes replied grimly. "Maybe sooner. This isn't going away, and trying to bury it will only make things exponentially worse." The real estate agent who'd been quietly eating breakfast at a corner booth slipped out the back door while everyone was distracted, already texting his developer clients with shaking fingers. "Property values about to tank in Millbrook. Pull all active listings immediately. Major incident involving federal government." Local radio host Michael Stevens broke into his regular morning programming within 15 minutes of the assault. "Folks, we're getting reports of an alleged incident at Murphy's Diner this morning. Details remain unclear at this time, but multiple parties are claiming to be victims of what some are calling a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by outside forces." The spin machine started immediately, even before anyone knew the full story. That was how these things always worked in small towns, where reputation mattered more than truth. Black SUVs with government plates appeared in downtown Millbrook exactly 23 minutes after Samuel's phone call. Not coming for Samuel directly, but conducting what they called a security assessment. Standard protocol whenever a cabinet member's family was involved in any kind of public incident. No matter how minor it seemed initially, the regional news stations picked up the story by 10 o'clock in the morning. Their breaking news alerts flashing across television screens throughout the state. Alleged assault at small-town diner involves family member of high-ranking federal official. Local man claims incident has been blown out of proportion by outside agitators. Federal civil rights investigators reportedly en route to Millbrook to conduct preliminary inquiry. The town began choosing sides almost immediately. The division spreading through social media and text messages faster than anyone could track. Team justice grew rapidly and organically. Maria's Instagram followers jumped from 800 to 15,000 within 2 hours. Regional civil rights groups started making phone calls to their contacts in Millbrook. Veterans organizations across 3 states expressed outrage at the treatment of an elderly veteran. The hashtag Respect Our Elders began trending nationally, piggybacking on the Millbrook story. Team Deflection circled the wagons with practiced efficiency. Local Facebook groups exploded with carefully worded comments designed to minimize and redirect. Small-town values under attack by political correctness. Outside forces exploiting a minor dispute for their own agenda. Good people being destroyed by mob mentality. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Bradley Morrison, now accompanied by a hastily hired liar named Gerald Hendricks, who specialized in damage control, released a statement through the local newspaper by early afternoon. The carefully worded text made Sheriff Hayes wince when she read it. "I sincerely regret any misunderstanding that occurred this morning at Murphy's Diner. Mr. Washington is a valued member of our Millbrook community, and I have the utmost respect for him. Sometimes tensions run high in small business environments, and words can be taken out of context. I look forward to resolving this matter privately and moving forward positively." No mention of the physical assault. No acknowledgement of the racist language captured on multiple recordings. No actual apology for anything specific. The half-hearted non-statement only made things worse. enraging people who'd seen the video evidence and insulting everyone's intelligence. Samuel declined most interview requests from journalists who began calling his phone constantly, but he agreed to speak with Rachel Morrison from the regional news station. She built a reputation for fairness over 20 years of reporting, and he trusted her to tell the story accurately. "This isn't about my son's position in government," Samuel stated calmly into the camera, his cut cheek visible but cleaned and bandaged. "It's about how we treat each other as human beings. It's about how we see each other. It's about whether we judge people by their character or by their appearance. That's all this has ever been about." His quiet dignity in the face of hatred made the story go viral even faster. The video clip of his interview was shared hundreds of thousands of times, his words resonating with people across the country who'd experienced similar treatment. By noon, security experts and legal analysts were analyzing the camera footage frame by frame on cable news shows. "This is clear evidence of premeditated assault with racial motivation," explained former federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh. "The verbal harassment establishes intent. The physical contact crosses into criminal territory. The racial language makes it a potential hate crime under federal statutes. This is textbook civil rights violation." Sheriff Hayes found herself in an impossible position that grew more uncomfortable by the hour. She couldn't bury this incident. Too many cameras had recorded everything. Too much attention was focused on Millbrook now. But she also couldn't afford to alienate the local power structure that had helped get her elected and kept her in office through 2 terms. Her official statement to reporters was carefully neutral, threading a needle between justice and political survival. "The investigation is ongoing. All parties involved are cooperating fully with law enforcement. We take any allegations of assault seriously and will conduct a thorough and impartial investigation according to established protocols." Translation: buying time, hoping the media circus would move on to the next story, praying that somehow this would blow over without destroying too many careers or reputations. WOUN single quotes T. Corporate headquarters for the Murphy's Diner chain, based 3 states away, issued their own carefully worded statement by mid-afternoon. "We are currently investigating this morning's incident at our Millbrook franchise location. Murphy's Diner does not condone discrimination or violence of any kind. We are committed to providing a welcoming environment for all customers, regardless of race, religion, or background. Further comment will be provided once our internal investigation is complete." Bradley's lawyer tried his own damage control during a hastily arranged press conference on the courthouse steps. Gerald Hendricks, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in small-town Millbrook, spoke with the practiced smoothness of someone who defended the indefensible before. "My client maintains his complete innocence of any criminal wrongdoing. The video footage being circulated has been taken out of context and does not show the full situation or what led up to the brief confrontation. Mr. Morrison looks forward to clearing his name and demonstrating that this incident has been grossly mischaracterized by those with political agendas. But there was no context that made racist assault acceptable. No backstory that justified putting hands on an elderly man. No explanation that would make those recorded words sound like anything other than exactly what they were. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Thomas Carter's original video had reached 500,000 views and was still climbing. The comments section had become a battleground where strangers argued about racism, justice, power, and accountability. The local story was rapidly becoming a national symbol of larger issues that America was still struggling to address. As the story went national throughout the afternoon, federal investigators were already making travel arrangements to Millbrook. They'd begun pulling records, reviewing footage, and making preliminary contact with witnesses. What they would discover over the coming days would shock everyone involved. This wasn't an isolated incident of one man losing his temper. This was a pattern that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. A systematic approach to exclusion that had been operating in plain sight for years, hiding behind the comfortable facade of small-town values and community standards. Phone records were already being subpoenaed. Social media accounts were being preserved as evidence. Financial transactions were being traced. The investigators were thorough, methodical, and absolutely relentless once civil rights violations entered federal jurisdiction. Back at Murphy's Diner, Maria cleaned up the broken coffee cups and spilled liquid, her mind racing. She'd lived in Millbrook her whole life, worked at this diner for 5 years, and thought she knew everyone. But the ugliness she'd witnessed this morning had shaken something fundamental in her. Understanding of her community. Fire. Chief Rodriguez sat in his office at the station, writing his official report of what he'd witnessed. His hands were steady, but his heart was heavy. He'd seen the harassment building over months and had done nothing to stop it. That failure would haunt him. Patricia Patterson sat in her living room, staring at her phone as text messages flooded in from friends and neighbors. Half were asking what she'd seen. Half were telling her to keep quiet for the good of the town. She thought about her husband, the mayor, about his political career, about the comfortable life they'd built together. Then she thought about Samuel Washington's face as Bradley's hand connected. The sound it had made. The blood. The humiliation of being treated as less than human while a room full of people watched. She made her decision. Whatever the cost, she would tell the truth. As the sun set on Millbrook that Tuesday evening, the town was already divided in ways that would take years to heal. The cameras were still rolling. The investigators were still coming. The evidence was still being gathered. And in his modest home on Maple Street, Samuel Washington sat in his favorite chair, his Purple Heart medal in its frame on the wall across from him, and wondered if standing up had been worth the chaos it had unleashed. His phone buzzed with another text from James. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. Let them come. Truth has a way of winning eventually." Samuel looked at those words for a long time before responding. "I hope you're right, son. I truly do." Outside his window, an unmarked car with federal plates pulled up to the curb. The protective detail James had sent. Samuel's quiet life was over, replaced by something he'd never wanted: notoriety, attention, and the heavy weight of being a symbol instead of just a man. But somewhere in the chaos, justice was beginning to move. Slowly, imperfectly, but inexorably forward. The real investigation was about to begin. Part 5. Patterns revealed 48 hours after the assault. Federal civil rights investigators arrived in Millbrook with 3 vehicles and a mandate that made local officials deeply uncomfortable. Agent Rebecca Carter led the team, assigned not because of James Washington's position, but because the video evidence had automatically triggered review protocols for potential hate crimes. She'd spent 15 years investigating civil rights violations across rural America, and she recognized the signs immediately. What they discovered in their initial sweep shocked even the experienced investigators. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a deliberate pattern. Agent Carter spread case files across the conference table in the room the sheriff's department had reluctantly provided. Each manila folder represented a different victim, a different incident, but all revealing the same ugly truth that had been hiding beneath Millbrook's friendly surface. March of last year, Agent Carter began, addressing her team and Sheriff Hayes, who'd been required to attend. Elderly Hispanic man named Roberto Flores, accused of shoplifting at Millbrook Grocery. Security footage later proved his complete innocence, but not before he was publicly humiliated, banned from the store, and told he should shop elsewhere. The ban was never lifted even after the footage cleared him. She opened another folder. January of last year. The Martinez family, who are black, were questioned about belonging at the community center during their daughter's basketball game. Someone called police, claiming they were trespassing on public property, despite having every right to be there. Officers questioned them for 20 minutes while other families watched. Another folder. November 2 years ago. Native American veteran named Douglas Whitehorse challenged at the voting location. Required to show multiple forms of identification, despite having proper credentials. Made to wait 40 minutes while poll workers verified his information. White voters sailed through without question. The folders kept coming, each one documenting a separate incident that had been dismissed, minimized, or ignored. September 2 years ago. Asian college students reported as suspicious persons for studying at the public library after dark. Police responded to complaints about potential gang activity. The students were studying for medical school entrance exams. Sheriff Hayes shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face growing paler with each folder. These were all reported as misunderstandings, she said weakly. There was never enough evidence to pursue charges. Or no one wanted to look closely enough, Agent Carter replied without judgment in her voice. Just cold fact. Every single incident involved minority community members. Every single incident involved public humiliation. Every single incident was dismissed as a misunderstanding without proper follow-up investigation. Agent Marcus Thompson, the cybersecurity specialist on Carter's team, pulled up his laptop and turned it toward the group. But we found something else. Something much more concerning than isolated incidents of racism. The screen showed a complex web of digital connections. Email chains, private social media groups, financial transactions, all linking together in a pattern that revealed systematic coordination. Email chains between city council members discussing tourism concerns and what they called changing demographics, Marcus explained, clicking through screenshots. Private Facebook groups with names like Millbrook Heritage Foundation and Citizens for Traditional Values. These aren't innocent civic organizations. These are coordination hubs. He pulled up message threads that made even Agent Carter wince. And she'd seen plenty of ugly evidence in her career. Direct coordination between local business owners to make certain customers feel unwelcome, Marcus continued. Code words like maintaining standards and protecting property values. But the private messages make the real intent crystal clear. The next revelation hit even harder. Financial records told a story that connected individual bigotry to systematic economic exclusion. Bradley Morrison donated $5,000 to the Millbrook Business Development Fund 18 months ago, Agent Thompson revealed, pulling up bank records on screen. That fund lobbied for enhanced security measures throughout downtown Millbrook. Those security measures included additional surveillance cameras, increased police patrols, and what they called safety protocols. But only in certain neighborhoods, Agent Carter added, her voice hard. The neighborhoods where minority families had recently moved. The areas where property values were supposedly at risk. The money trail became even more damning as they dug deeper. 3 minority-owned businesses had closed within 18 months. The flower shop owned by the Flores family. The small restaurant run by the Chun family. The bookstore that Maria's aunt had tried to open. All 3 had faced what appeared to be random challenges that made continuing impossible. Permit delays that stretched for months. Health inspections that found violations other businesses somehow avoided. Customer harassment that was never properly investigated. Vandalism that police reports dismissed as random mischief. Insurance rates that mysteriously skyrocketed. Supplier contracts that fell through for no clear reason. Property values in those areas dropped 30% after the businesses closed, making them attractive targets for developers with connections to city officials. It wasn't random racism driven by individual hatred. It was systematic exclusion for profit. dressed up in the language of community standards and property protection. The social media excavation revealed Bradley Morrison's true thoughts in painful detail. His Facebook history showed years of posts about protecting small-town values and maintaining community standards. Surface-level complaints that seemed almost reasonable if you didn't look too closely. But the private group messages used language that would make even hardened racists uncomfortable. The cyber forensics team had recovered posts Bradley thought he'd deleted. Messages from the night before he assaulted Samuel. "That old man comes in acting like he owns the place," Bradley had written in a private message to 6 other Millbrook residents. Time to remind him and people like him where they stand in this town. Another message from the same night. "Community meeting tomorrow about the problem we discussed. People might need to make an example soon." And the most chilling, sometimes lessons have to get physical. Some folks only understand strength. The assault hadn't been a random moment of lost temper. It had been premeditated, discussed, and planned as a deliberate message to the entire minority community in Millbrook. Sheriff Hayes' role became increasingly clear as the investigation progressed. Her response patterns showed what the investigators termed deliberate negligence. Incident reports filed but never properly investigated. Complaints labeled as misunderstandings without any follow-up interviews. Media contacts minimized or buried, entirely in filing systems where they'd never surface. When pressed by federal investigators in a formal interview, Sheriff Hayes finally admitted what everyone had suspected. She'd received over a dozen formal complaints about discriminatory treatment in the past 18 months alone. Her action on those